This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today, July 13th of 2022. It is a Wednesday, and we've made an observation. I think it's really important. It's something that we saw in the news, or in fact, something that we're not seeing in the news, and a conclusion that should be celebrated across the nation. It's the fact that we have seen a solution. Democrats have done something, and you have benefited. Or have you? It's a really big question. And we're going to address that in just a moment. Now, first, before we do get started, I do want to say, if this is the first time that you are with us, we welcome you and thank you for being part of our audience. We appreciate it. And we want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. In fact, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to hear your voice, to hear what you have to say about the issues that are affecting us all. And we do that from anywhere in the world that you are able to speak and to share your thoughts. Because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right by birth to be able to say what you think on the things, on the issues that matter to you. Whether your government agrees, whether the internet overlords agree, we look forward to hearing your voice every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we hope you will join us this Sunday as well. I think it's really important to highlight that there has been a massive development, or it would seem that there has been a massive development in the United States, that you have suddenly become more safe. Or at least that's the impression that the major news media and many politicians would like you to believe. And they are counting on that for the 2022 midterm elections and the impression overseas as well. Let me explain what I mean. You may recall that right about April of 2022, we started seeing a massive influx of stories about mass shootings. In fact, we were covering that during the time. You may recall, it was back in April, the mass shooting, the New York subway shooting. A black supremacist decided to go out and to, under the role of critical race theory, decided to take away the evil white people of America and was shooting people in a New York City subway. And that kicked off a cycle of news and stories talking about the evils of guns, not the shooter, well, not always the shooter. And I think it's pretty important to go over that because it wasn't just in April that we saw that. We then saw the Biden-Harris administration appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, Governor Newsom, and so many others came out and started saying, well, it's the ghost guns. That's the problem. And the solution, well, they had to do something, and they had to do what they wanted to do was red flag laws. That would solve it. And an executive order on ghost guns. That would do it. That would solve the problem. And they would take away your self-defense. That's right. They would go out and take away your ability to passively defend yourself and your family by owning body armor, bulletproof vests. That was their answer, because that obviously was part of the crime. That was part of influencing the gun crime and the rise of violence in America. And then we heard from people like Steve Kerr, and the question of gun control kept coming at us throughout April, throughout May, throughout June. We had the Buffalo shooting, the Uvalde shooting. We had, of course, the July shooting, and case after case. And we saw that our politicians decided, well, they needed to pass H.R. 7910, the Protecting Our Kids Act. That doesn't actually stop criminals. It stops American citizens from being able to defend themselves, to exercise their Second Amendment rights. And then we saw that there was also the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which encourages, it actually pays states to create a list of American citizens that have been denied their Second Amendment rights because of an accusation, not because of a crime, not because they have done something, but because someone accused them of potentially one day being a criminal. Yes, that's where we have gotten to now. And we heard about H.R. 2377, the National Red Flag Law. This culminated on July 4th weekend in the shooting in Highland Park. And we were told day after day, sometimes twice a week, that gun control was ravaging this nation, that this was a massive problem, and that we had to be afraid. We had to be scared. In fact, you may recall, just looking at it now, and I'll refresh it with you here, mass shootings per day in 2022. There have been over 300 mass shootings in 2022. This is according to the Washington Post on June 2nd. But May 15th, NPR said there were 309 mass shootings. And then The Insider on July 5th said there are 314 mass shootings. We're told that there have been shooting after shooting after shooting. In fact, the numbers conflict because everyone has a different way of counting what is and is not a mass shooting. But no matter how you counted it, America was overwhelmed and you were in danger. And something had to be done. In fact, that's what Joe Biden said in one of his press conferences to the nation. They had to do something. They didn't tell you that they were going to do something effective. They didn't say they were going to do something that was efficient. They said they were just going to do something. And they did. They did do something because it didn't affect criminals, but it did affect your ability to own a firearm. And they passed a couple of these bills. They passed into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And, you know, it must have worked. It was immediate. After all that fear, after all that terror, after being told that you were in danger, your children are in danger, and the only person who could possibly help you was the government. You couldn't rely on yourself. You couldn't rely on your neighbors. You couldn't rely on passive defense. No, you had to rely on elected officials, especially if they were Democrats, because they were the only ones who were going to protect you. And just like that, right after the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was passed, the headlines went away. The headlines are gone. You haven't heard about gun control. You haven't heard about gun violence or crime in general. The story's gone. We're talking about inflation now. And it's not Joe Biden's fault. It's Putin's fault. It's someone else's fault. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the United States or domestic policy. And let's not talk about the southern border because that's not important right now. No. We have to focus on abortion and Putin. And, crime is gone. We've solved that. Thank goodness the Democrats, the progressives, came forward and passed these laws that take away your Second Amendment rights. That fixed it. Or did it? We don't have to worry about those things anymore because now we have passed a Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which will only help by funding programs that aren't effective, and it will create a list of American citizens punished state by state, and those states will be rewarded with your taxpayer dollars to grow that list of people who have been denied, again, without ever committing a crime, without ever being even accused of a crime. No, they've just been accused of potentially, maybe, one day, possibly being dangerous. And that's good enough. It's good enough to get a check from the federal government, from the Biden-Harris administration, funded by your taxes. That's what we got done. And the news media would like you to believe that that worked. Except, again, put in Chicago shootings. This weekend, 18 hours ago, 3 people were charged with shooting after a cop was shot. Wow, that doesn't sound like it's safer. This weekend in Chicago, after the July 6th, after the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, after seeing 7910 protecting our kids passed in the House of Representatives, 33 people were shot this weekend in Chicago. But that's not big news. That wasn't something that the news media focused on. How about New York City? How about New York State? We've asked New York shooting. Let's see. New York, 4 people shot and killed 3 hours. 5 people fatally shot in 4 hours in New York City. These are stories from 4 hours ago. That's interesting. Father and son shot in Brooklyn during an argument over a parking space 18 hours ago. How about in LA? LA shooting. Well, what do you know? LA Times. 2 dead in shootings at 7-Elevens in Southern California during a robbery spree. Man identified 6 hours ago. Man killed during possible road rage shooting. But these aren't national stories. This isn't the big news. I mean, between April and July 4th, it was big news. Democrats told you they were going to do something, and they did a bunch of things. But it seems crime is still with us. Violent crime is still with us. Shootings are still with us. And depending on how you want to count, mass shootings are still with us. They're just not getting attention anymore. Why is that? Why is it that suddenly, after months of making you afraid, telling you you had to be terrified for your life and your family's life, and that there was no way you could take responsibility for yourself and defend yourself, why did the stories just stop? It's kind of like with the New York subway shooting. The black supremacist, that story disappeared 2 days after it came out. Oh, Uvalde? No, that's been talked down quite a bit. How about the Buffalo shooting with the racist? Well, that's not really big news now anymore either. In fact, 4th of July, that story's gone. We're not talking about that crazed individual that appears to be a progressive, and yet we still see the crime. We still know that there are people like the attempted assassin of a Supreme Court justice. They're out there. Why is it that the stories are gone now? Why is it that the news media seem to be giving you the impression the Democrats have solved it? Because the stories are gone. And it can't be an issue. It can't be important if the news media isn't telling you about it, if this isn't national news, because they just spent 3 months telling you day after day that this was the number one issue in America. Or maybe it was just the number one issue to get to the primaries. Maybe it was the number one issue to get you scared, to make sure you support the bills the Democrats wanted that take away your rights. Maybe it was just enough to get them to take away your rights and freedoms. You may disagree. How about this? I noticed Josh Riley, he's running for the New York 19th Congressional District. And he's a Democrat, and I do know him. I've known him for years. And Josh is saying that he filed legal briefs supporting equal rights amendment, stronger campaign finance laws, and healthcare as a civil right. He doesn't mention anything about gun control, but he does go on to say that he worked to strengthen voting rights under Senator Al Franken before he was unceremoniously kicked out of the Senate by Democrats because of Me Too allegations. And he worked with Al Franken to strengthen voting rights and reform the criminal justice system, that very same criminal justice system, that bail reform system that has allowed criminals who burned down our cities and killed innocent individuals from 2020 all the way to 2022. Well, he helped make that possible. Isn't that great? And it must be good because there's no more news about mass shootings. There's no more news about gun violence in America. That story's gone. We're done. They fixed it. But did they really? I think it's kind of like what we see, and it's summed up in this Atlantic article. That's right, I'm going to the Atlantic. It's a left-leaning news organization. And their article, which is The Liberals Who Won't Acknowledge the Crime Problem, refusing to admit the gravity of the problem won't make it go away, by Shadi Hamid. And this article, which was pushed put out on June 21st, I think it covers quite a bit about this. I want to quote him here. Being forthright with the public when certain categories of crime are increasing is important, but debates over numbers obscure a more fundamental objection. The data miners, the generalists, and otherwise well-intentioned people who believe, as one might believe in a religion, that all we need to come to the right conclusion is the right information, seem unable to grasp that crime isn't just crime. Crime is also a proxy for a deeper malaise, that inchoate sense of almost but not quite social collapse that's in the air we breathe, impossible to measure with precision, but unmistakably palpable all the same. The malaise draws on our own confusion, driven by the intuition that things aren't as they should be. Burglaries and homicides are not the only signs that something is amiss. The tent encampments that have spread across our nation's capital over the past 2 years suggest that something has gone very, very wrong. This is the most powerful city in the world, and yet people are living in makeshift tents in the richest neighborhoods, a stone's throw away from the White House and Capitol Hill. But no one seems to know what to do about it, or people who do know what to do about it, but can't be bothered to act. I think this is very important, and I think it's very accurate. The thing is that gun crime didn't stop. Violent crime has not stopped. Crime in general has not just ceased to exist. The stories are still there. They're just not important enough to let everyone in the nation know about. They don't serve a purpose anymore. The objective has been gained. Yes, the Supreme Court said that you have a right to conceal carry, but in one day, in less than 24 hours, New York State came out under appointed Governor Kathy Hochul and appointed Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado. We see that they came out and they fixed that. The Supreme Court says and reaffirms you have a Second Amendment right. New York State said, no, we're going to deny you that right. We're going to make it too expensive, too time consuming. We're going to make sure you still cannot exercise your rights. Not because you're safer, because they don't want you to have it. Just like we see with every other form of gun control. It's not making you safer. It's not punishing the criminals. The criminals are still committing the crimes at exactly the same rate that they were before. But just like before April and after July 4th, it's no longer important. Because politically, they already achieved the goal that they wanted. They passed the law they wanted to get passed. They denied you your rights. They made it harder for you to ever exercise your rights, especially if you happen to be a woman, especially if you happen to be poor, especially if you live in one of the progressive capitals of the United States. That would be New York or LA or Chicago or Baltimore. Yeah, you definitely can't use your rights there. They succeeded in that. But the criminals, they didn't care before, and they don't care now. So I have to ask the question. The media wants you to believe that the fear is gone. Democrats have succeeded. You are safe. Except the data tells us you're no more safe than you ever were before. Except that the news reports tell us that the problem is just the same as it always was. That the root issues causing these crimes, that hasn't gone away. In fact, that's continuing to get worse. So what have the Democrats actually done? They took away your rights. They took away your freedom. They made it harder for you to defend yourself, your family, your property, even passively defending yourself. And you're supposed to thank them now for that. You're supposed to vote for them in primaries. You're supposed to vote for them in November for the 2022 midterm elections. You're supposed to give them the reward of keeping them in power, keeping them as elites. But you're no better off. Not even close. In fact, some would say, and we say, you're worse off. Criminals have less to worry about. Yes, in New York State, there are gun-sensitive zones, kind of like the gun-free zones that are targeted by mass shooters on a regular basis over 90% of the time. And now we have gun-sensitive areas, entire counties in some cases. And criminals know that. They know you can't defend yourself anymore. They're not stopped by the law. They're criminals. They don't follow the law. You're stopped. You're a law-abiding citizen. Who wins in that situation? Well, you would think it's the criminal. But the news media decided you no longer need to know. Does it mean it's not happening? Of course it's happening. You just don't know about it. You're not being told about it. And so, with that misunderstanding in hand, they want you to go to the ballot box or to mail in your vote and keep these elites in power because they hid something. Let me ask you, now that you think about it, without the emotion, without the sensationalism being pumped in by the major news media, when you stop and you think about the situation, are you truly better off? Did they do something that helped you, or did they do something that helped them? It's a good question. And you might want to remember that as you go through this primary season. You may want to remember that in November. We'd like to hear what you think about that. And we hope that you'll join us on Sunday during our live stream starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we like to hear what you have to say.